Welcome to Cognition, the podcast where we cover a variety of games and the mechanics behind the skills that your brain uses to learn and to play them. Today's episode is all about the photon swords, can't get me that easily, Disney, boxes, laser shows, and an absolutely amazing soundtrack. That's right, today's episode is about the VR classic, Beatsaber. Hey, just a quick note in case you didn't know beforehand. VR stands for virtual reality, which is a category of device like a computer or mobile phone. The way it works is you strap a screen over your eyes and you have a controller in each hand. Both the screen, or the headset as it's commonly called, and the controllers have their positions tracked so you can interact with the virtual reality you see through the headset. Beatsaber is a virtual reality rhythm game where players use lightsabers to slash through blocks that come at them in time with music. Developed by a Czech-based indie game studio, Beat Games, it has gained significant popularity for its fun gameplay and a wide range of available songs. That being said though, a central part of the game, and the main focus of today's podcast, is needing to hit the red with the red saber and the blue with the blue saber at the same time, aka multitasking. Now, scientifically speaking, multitasking is a bit of a misnomer. For conscious tasks, or a task that you have to think through how to do it, doing multiple tasks at once doesn't happen. It's impossible. An excellent way to explain how our conscious attention works is with the spotlight attention model. Imagine you have a flashlight in a dark cave. You're only able to shine the light in one place at a time, despite the fact that you're able to quickly move the light or remember what you looked at before when you were moving the light. So let's say that you're switching between catching a ball that you're throwing, which is task A, and flipping a coin, which is task B. In this scenario, both task A and task B require you to use the delicate motor part of your brain. So, in order to switch from task A, catching the ball, and task B, flipping the coin, you need to clear all the information that you're currently processing for task A in the delicate motor part of your brain, and then start the process of engaging that same part of your brain with all the information and actions that you need to do task B. Alright, that was a lot of jargon, but please stick with me while I apply it to Beatsaber. I swear it's easier to keep up with for this section. So, you don't actually process both of the colors of the blocks at the same time, instead processing one at a time. So for each block, you need to take in the color of the block, the position of the block, when the block will be close enough, and which direction it needs to slice into it. You also need to figure out that each of these types of information is what you need to consider to complete the task. Then, you need to process all that information, pick the right saber, and thus the arm, find the correct position to put your arm in, move your arm there, wait for the right moment, and then move your saber. And you need to do this for every single block. So your conscious thought process for a portion of a beginner level would sound something like this. Block is red, it's in the bottom left, I need to swipe it down. My left hand has the red saber, I need to bring my left hand up, I need to bring my left hand down. So admittedly, this is ridiculous. Having to consciously work through all these steps simply isn't realistic, even with how fast the brain can process information. What I've explained so far has been about your brain doing conscious tasks. This should actually make a lot of sense if you think about other simple tasks that you've done in your life. You don't actually need to completely process how to drive a car or use roller skates, even though when you first started, you might have. And this is because they've become something called a motor program. Essentially, what your brain is doing is categorizing types of actions into instructions for set actions, which contain parameters for needed sub-actions, and the initial conditions that cause the action, which both determine where within the parameters the sub-actions fall, and which action within the category of actions is chosen, and the sensory consequences for said subactions and the actual physical action. Understand? No? Yeah. This is something I need to explain piece by piece, so let's get into that. The core piece for this process is what's called a general motor program, or a GMP. What a GMP does is store the specific actions needed to repeat an action. To generate or refine a GMP, your brain works through a motor response schema. And a quick note for anyone unaware, a schema is a psychology term for what is pretty much a guideline for how to effectively process information that you've previously processed. The motor response works in these 4 steps. In the first step, the information that falls within the motor response parameters is processed. Then, in the second step, the specifics of said information is compared with the information from past GMPs using a component of the response schema called the recall schema to find the most relevant GMP and begin enacting it. Then, in the next step, using the recognition schema, information from the consequences of the current enactment is compared to what expected consequences were in past enactments. If there is still enough time between what sub-action you are currently at and when the task is going to be fully complete, the difference between the two can then be used by the recall schema to pick a better GMP to start following. Then, in the last step, the outcome of the action specified in the GMP is processed, which will either result in no change if you got the desired outcome, or the refinement or generation of a new GMP if the outcome was not the one desired. This is based upon a variety of information, such as relevant aspects of the initial information that you processed that fell outside of the GMP parameters, or a difference in the consequences of the current action compared to past ones. Alright, that's still confusing, so let's work through the process using a bouncy ball as an example. So first, your brain recognizes the ball, the speed that it's moving, the size of the ball, and which direction it's moving in. Any information that doesn't fit within these parameters that the motor response schema has given is completely disregarded. Then, in the second step, all that information is compared with the matching type of the information that was recognized in the past to decide the specific instructions to follow for what your actions should be. For the sake of this example, let's say you've never caught a bouncy ball before. So your brain would match the information to something in the past that was a close match, like catching a ping pong ball. So your brain would see that the speed of the bouncy ball and the size of the bouncy ball is similar to the speed and the size of the ping pong ball, so then your brain would start the actions that would usually be used to catch a ping pong ball. Then in the next step, any information that is from you starting the action, things such as the distance between the ball and your hand, or the feeling of grabbing the ball, is then processed and matched to what these feelings, also known as consequences, should be in the examples where you've caught a ping pong ball. Then, the success of the action is evaluated, where the instructions that you use to do the action are either refined or a new action is made off of the information that is from you starting the action that was different from what it was expected to be. So for the bouncy ball example, the next time you try to catch a bouncy ball, the instructions in your brain will tell you that this time you should have a slightly different distance that you should have your hand compared to the ball at a certain point, so that way it's easier to catch. Alright, so let's apply this to Beatsaber. When you play through your first song, you'll have to go through the mental motions that I described before, processing all the information, picking out the position of the block, picking out that the block is blue, picking out that the block needs me to swipe down through it, that I need to use my right controller because the block is blue, that I need to bring my arm up here because of where it is and the direction I need to cut through it, that I need to swipe down because of the direction I need to swipe in. But then, after you work through this process 2 or 3 times, you've developed a motor response schema and a few GMPs. And the process to hit the block becomes a bit more like this. The block is here. It's blue. I need to cut down through it. This mostly matches the information from the past action. Therefore, I do what I did the past time. This, whereas the last time, felt like this. Then afterwards, if it worked, it stays the same. If it mostly worked, the instructions slightly change. And if it didn't work, new instructions are made from the failure. this works in a way that it is more efficient than the conscious way that I described before. However, this doesn't completely cover multitasking in this game. Using the motor response schema how I just described is what you will be doing in your head for your first time playing through a song. And don't get me wrong, it works great. But there is a better way to do it. You see, these schemas, or the GMPs, kind of work like building blocks. At first, you're able to build them, and you're able to see a thing, do the action, see a thing, do the action, see a thing, do the action. But eventually, you're able to see a thing, know you need to do 2 actions. See a thing, know you need to do 2 actions. And then a tiny bit past that, you see a thing, know you need to do 2 actions. You get the feedback sound of the blocks getting hit to know if you did it correctly or not. And then after that feedback sound, and after knowing that you've just did those 2 actions, you know you need to do another specific action, and another specific action, and another specific action. And what eventually happens is that in a kind of GMP stack, you're able to go from one instructions for actions to another instructions for actions to another instructions for actions, not actually needing to process any of the new information to do these actions regularly, instead just processing the feedback from the past action and knowing that it was the past action, and having remembered from times past when you've done this song that this is the action that you're going to need to do at this time. And when you do this, what happens in a beginner level? Input. Action. And an expert level, input. Almost become the same. The complexity of the motor response that you're going through is way more complex for the expert level. But the initial start of it is pretty much the same, and the only change is the amount of actions that you have and the amount of consequences, or like check marks, that you can have to know if you've done something wrong or not. And that perfectly explains how people are able to master such like insane levels of this game. Because I'm not able to put up a clip here, but I'll play some of the music in a clip in a second, and you can look it up for yourself. Some of these levels are absolutely crazy, and it's very difficult, and it takes a very long time. But this is the process that your brain goes through, especially for those very, very difficult levels where you can pretty much almost do it with your eyes closed sometimes. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Cognition. I hope you enjoy. You are listening to WHJ.com. Go listen to some of our other podcasts. They're very, very good. I could say so myself. I've made a few of the other ones. And my name has been Dylan Cheever. I've been your narrator, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.